Hey, spiritual extremist, Dr. Lloyd-Moffett, and I'm going to talk more about the body today because the best or greatest lie that the body tells people spiritually is that it's neutral, that it doesn't have any agenda. It's just there to support your spiritual life, or it's in the background and is unrelated to your spiritual life. But what ascetics say is that your body is a seductive fiend that ultimately wants to control you, and its greatest weapon is to try to convince people that it's not that. And so how does the body do that? First, it seduces us with pleasure. It seems like humans are pre-programmed to seek after pleasure. You don't have to tell your body to want the triple chocolate cake at Costco. You don't have to convince someone to like Krispy Kreme donuts. You don't have to teach high schoolers that sex feels good. You don't have to, explain why sleeping on a really comfy bed is good. In other words, our body seems to be pre-programmed to seek out pleasure and draw attention to itself. But what's interesting about that pleasure is addictive. Once we start tasting great food, we want more of it. Once we have our first In-N-Out burger, it's like, oh my gosh, let's get more and more of that. Once you have the first handful of spicy almonds, you just can't finish it. And think of also, once you have good sexual encounters, you begin to say, hey, this is something I want more and more in my life. Once you start having good wine, you want more and more of that. Once you sleep in a comfy bed, it suddenly becomes hard to sleep in a bad bed. In other words, our bodies are not just pre-programmed to seek out pleasure, but it's also seems to be pre-programmed to be addicted to pleasure. And so pleasure is like a drug for ascetics. If you haven't done drugs, they make you feel good and they make you want that feeling more and more. And so our body seduces us with pleasure. It says, pay attention to me, make me your Lord, and it lures us. But it also works the other side, pain. Pain seduces us because it constantly tries to tell us to pay attention to your body. And so even if you don't have a lot of joint pain now, or your body isn't breaking down, at some point it will. And eventually you'll end up in your 60s on Pismo Beach talking with all your friends about all the pains and ailments you have in your life. And what pain does is say, pay attention to the body. Dedicate yourself to me. And so then pain makes us enslaved to the body. And so what so many religions say is this seduction that makes us addicted to pleasure and this pain that tells us to constantly pay attention to the body, these are both things that lure us away. Listen to Christianity, the Apostle Paul. He says, do you not know that that in a race the runners all compete but only one receives the prize? Run in such a way that you may win it. Athletes exercise self-control in all things. They do it to receive a perishable wreath, but we an imperishable one. So I do not run aimlessly, nor do I box as through beating in the air, but I punish or I beat my body and enslave it, so that after proclaiming to others, I myself should not be disqualified. So notice here, the primary interpreter of Christianity says we must beat our bodies and enslave it, because the alternative is our bodies enslave us. And so the person who flagellates themselves, they're there not because they hate their body, but they want to be free of the slavery to the body. And so you train your body until it submits to you and makes it lose its power over you. And so what is the promise then? It's freedom. It's free to live a life in which your body isn't in control, where your body isn't seducing you with pleasure or enslaving you with pain. And so what it tries to do is it says, look, I don't have to say yes to my body when it says sleep more. I don't have to say yes when my body says eat more food. I don't have to say yes when my body is trying to tell me to pay attention to that ailment or the other. And so ascetics may be extreme, but it's only because they so desperately want to be free, and they look at everybody else as the enslaved ones, because we're enslaved to what our bodies guide us to. Now, we should point out that, we showed a lot of extreme pictures here at the beginning of this, but that's not how ascetics start off. You don't start off flagellating yourself. But what you do is you say, hey, look, I realize that I'm really addicted to pleasure. And so you say, hey, maybe I won't, sleep quite so many hours, or maybe I won't long for a comfy bed. But if that doesn't work, and then you start ramping it up, and so you say, okay, well, maybe I will sleep on a hard surface. And if you still find yourself obsessed with bodily pleasure, then you might, attack that more directly. And so in some ways, the ascetic becomes the mere opposite of the drug addict. The small stuff opens a window into what's possible, and you begin to take harder and harder measures, and soon you become so driven to eradicate the enslavement to the body that most people don't even realize they have. And that is true freedom, when you're no longer attached to what your body demands of you, but you can listen solely to your spirit. That is, as one monk told me, the only free person is the one who's no longer owned by the body. Let's look at this with Simeon the Stylite.